Hello, I'm Marlis Arnold, trade show marketing consultant and author of the book, Build a Better Trade Show Image. Welcome to the Trade Show Insights podcast with news, tips, and tools to expand your knowledge of exhibiting. Today, we're talking event technology with industry expert Michelle Bruno in the first of a two-part interview. Well, our guest today for Trade Show Insights is Michelle Bruno, who is a writer, blogger, and content strategist. She's the president of Salt Lake City-based Bruno Group Signature Events, a content marketing firm for the face-to-face event industry. She writes about event industry social media, technology, and innovation at forkintheroadblog.com. She blogs about mobile for CVent and publishes the Event Tech Brief newsletter at eventtechbrief.com. She's also a writer for IAEE's quarterly publication, Newslines, and serves on the EIBTM Tech Watch Committee, which awards recognition to the top event industry technology providers in the world. So obviously, Michelle knows a lot about what's going on in the world of event technology, and we are very delighted to have her here today as our guest. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Marlis. It's my pleasure.
Well, let's start out with a couple of things that I think have been big buzzwords in event technology, but I'm not sure they're really going anywhere. One is RFID, and the other is QR codes. And I thought we could just start with that, and you could address whether or not that's something that we even need to be thinking about at this point. And if not, then where are we going instead?
All right. Well, let's start with RFID. I wouldn't necessarily say it's not going anywhere. In fact, quite the opposite is true. I just wouldn't characterize it as really a trend or something new. RFID is actually a technology that was used during World War II. So it's been around for many, many decades. And in fact, it's been used by a number of companies in the event space, specifically trade shows, pretty consistently for the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years. It's being used, both inside an event environment, a trade show environment, and in the exhibit booth to really capture data about attendees, booth visitors, and their behaviors. So a sort of new cousin of RFID, which is NFC, is now actually becoming even more popular than it was based on, I think, the early successes of RFID. And NFC is just that sort of technology where it's very close-range RFID, and you can use your mobile devices to access information or do various things by tapping your phone, your NFC-enabled phone, on a reader. So that is actually very exciting in terms of RFID NFC use. QR codes, I think that's a little bit different. I have a different feeling about that. It's been around for some time. I think a lot of different mobile app developers have incorporated it, and event organizers are using it sporadically, and even exhibitors are using it in booths. I just don't see how that it's hugely being adopted, that it's hugely popular or that attendees are in love with it. So I think we've got a ways to go on QR codes, although the technology is certainly there. It's got tremendous potential. I just don't think it's necessarily on fire. So those are my thoughts about that.
Well, and the thing I've seen with the QR codes, too, is that there's a lot of inconsistency with it. There doesn't seem to be like one standard scanner app that you can use. It seems like a lot of different shows, they'll use it, but then you have to download this special scanner app just for their show or something. And so it seems like it seems like it has a lot of potential, but it hasn't been streamlined yet. And so I think that's probably part of why it hasn't really achieved any kind of mass traction.
Yeah, actually, what I see and what I'm sort of feeling about that is that it's going to be, other technology is going to leapfrog over QR codes. Other technology, including NFC-enabled applications or even some of the microlocation technologies that use beacons to read a cell phone app or a mobile device app and deliver content based on, what the beacon recognizes and understands about the user based on the profile that's loaded into the app.
Is that kind of like the Foursquare technology where it's zeroing in on your location?
Yeah, not necessarily. Well, yes and no. So microlocation is where there's literally a 2-by-2 inch square beacon placed throughout an event environment, or in a trade show booth, or in a museum. And when someone has an app downloaded on their mobile device, and they approach the beacon automatically knows who that person is, and they serve up specific content to that person based on their profile. So when you have things like that, and there's other things, there's geofencing that's some people are experimenting with. So you create this sort of virtual fence around a specific geographic area inside your event, and anytime an attendee with an app running crosses this sort of virtual barrier, different things could happen. The app can serve up content. The app can give them, updates or things like that. So when you have these much easier ways to, sort of achieve a goal than what we're doing now with QR codes, I think those other things are going to just jump over QR codes because there's just too much friction there for the users. You've got to download the scanner, or you have to download the QR code and then show your phone to a scanner. I mean, there's just like all this stuff you have to do, and it doesn't always work. Mm-hmm. These newer things, the use of beacons and the geofencing, and maybe even we talked about augmented reality. Maybe even augmented reality is just going to be these natural ways for content and things to show up on your phone, and they're already intelligent. More so than what the QR codes can do. So I think QR codes are great, and they're useful in some circumstances, but I think now there are other technologies that are just going to pretty much blow them away and make them irrelevant eventually because they're just easier to use.
Well, and I like that you brought up augmented reality. Let's talk about that a little bit because I haven't seen it in use at trade shows yet. I've seen it in some direct mail pieces and things like that. And I know that there's a lot of buzz in the marketing world right now about using augmented reality, and I've dabbled with it a little bit as far as being a user, and it is very cool and impressive what it can do. Can you go ahead and explain a little bit about what augmented reality is and where you see that going?
So my understanding of augmented reality is really to using a device to look at a real-life space or, let's just say in our case, an event environment or a specific location on a trade show floor, and using the capabilities of the device, add a layer of virtual information. So, for example, you could be pointing your mobile device at a beacon or something, and then on your app there will appear, let's say, a video playing or other information that is superimposed over what the physical scene is showing you through the app camera. We'll also be seeing it through, for example, Google Glass, where people are wearing these devices, these mobile devices, and they're looking at something that exists in the real world, but then they're able to see this virtual layer of content on top of that realistic, in real life scene. So it could be video, it could be, written text, messaging, it could be bubbles of, content and information. So I think I agree with you, Marlis. I think the technology is very interesting and it's really cool. But from a B2B perspective, I would like to see how using that technology is going to move the needle on those things that we're interested in, which is return on investment, which is monetization, which is, perhaps engagement. I want to see whoever comes up with the augmented reality apps and technology within the event space, how they're going to translate that into the goals that we always look for with anything. So,
well, and one of the
hopefully you'll let me know.
I will. I'll definitely let you know when I see somebody using it in the right way at trade shows, that is. Well, one of the examples that I've seen was like you held your device over a picture of a I forget what you call it, but the spinning dial on a safe, the wheel. Mm-hmm. And so you held it over this picture, and then all of a sudden the wheel started spinning, and it unlocked, and the door opened. So it was like a video of this whole thing of the door opening, and you could see inside, and then you could like tilt the camera, and then you could like kind of sort of look around inside the safe, And I was thinking from that, I thought, well, a great idea for exhibitors would be, if you have some gigantic piece of equipment or something that you can't actually bring and display at the show, what a cool way, somebody could point their device at a specific picture, and then they could get like a kind of a virtual reality tour of how the equipment worked or something. Mm-hmm. So I could see it being used in that kind of way, but like I said, I haven't seen anybody on a show floor using it yet.
Yeah, I think that sounds to me like a really interesting way of using it, and I think it has potential. I think it's up to the developer to really connect the dots between, something that's really unique and engaging and experiential and how it will, achieve that particular goal of either making a particular piece of equipment more memorable or, using that augmented delivery system to give them information they couldn't get any other way. Like you said, the machine's not there. So this is a good way to, demonstrate your equipment. So, it's all about how it's used. It's not the fact that it exists. Because,
right.
Going back to the whole discussion about RFID and NFC and all of those things, a lot of it's been around for a while. What's interesting is the new ways that companies are seeing it and using it, for their particular ends to, overcome pain points that they have or that their customers have. That's what's fascinating to me.
Well, and it seems like with every technology, there's this I don't know that you really call it a learning curve, but like a user curve, I guess, where, at first everybody's using it just because it's the latest thing and it's really cool. And then finally people start realizing it's like, okay, there needs to be a reason. There needs to be some kind of a benefit to using this. And they start to figure out how to make it work, even if it's a tool that wasn't necessarily meant to be used that way. I mean, Facebook is one example of that. It was designed as basically a virtual online yearbook for college students, and now it's being used for all kinds of business purposes. So I think you're right that it's, don't just use the technology for technology's sake, but figure out what it's really going to do to benefit your company or your organization.
Yeah, I think to that point, it's really critical that people in our trade show space understand what everything is and what it does in order to understand the potential for, solving problems and addressing those pain points and creating a better mousetrap, if you will, for customers. If you don't know what's out there, even if it's just this, really exciting and stimulating and amusing thing, then you can't really ideate around how it can solve your problems. So looking at augmented reality and all of those things are still critically important for, event planners and trade show organizers and exhibitors to understand so that they can make the connections themselves. Because the developers don't understand the intricacies of everyone's specific business.
No.
Only the, the exhibitors and the event owners know that. All they can hope to do is really sort of bring an exciting way to them and then let these guys understand how you can use it.
Well, and on that note, let's talk about event mobile apps, because that's probably one technology that is the big buzzword and everybody's all excited about it, but yet I've seen very few shows that are actually using a mobile app that's effective. I mean, a lot of them, it seems like basically all it is, their quote-unquote app is just, you just put it on your home screen and it takes you to the show's website. So talk a little bit about what you've seen with event mobile apps and where you see those going.
Well, I think there are events using them effectively. I see the other side of it where I have clients that I write case studies for, so I get to see the metrics behind the apps that are being, implemented in specific events, trade shows, for example. I've been able to see how the adoption rates have gone up significantly over the last couple of years. I mean, it used to be that, if four attendees downloaded your app, they'd be thrilled. Now, if you don't get 50% of adoption, you're kind of, you're a loser, or the app isn't working and things like that. But I just think in general, I do see mobile devices and mobile applications becoming a very important focal point for events now and in the future, just because that's what's happening outside of our little event bubble. But what's interesting now is that mobile app developers, so these are the guys that were early on developing applications like conference guides. So you have, instead of the printed directory, you have lists of exhibitors, and you have your conference agenda and all those sorts of tools now distilled down to an app that fits in the palm of your hand. So that was kind of the first iteration, and that's still happening, a lot. But the other thing that's also happening is that these mobile platforms and the platform developers are realizing that they can now actually have access to be able to solve other problems, let's just say. And some of them are going from just having a conference guide, they're dabbling in registration. So they're sort of trying to, a big pain point has always been that the registration companies owned all the data, and anybody else in the food chain had to sort of get in line and make nice with the registration companies so that they would share the data with them so that the app would be meaningful. It doesn't do any good to know how many downloads you have unless you know who's actually doing the download. And a lot of times you have to, sort of associate what's going on with your app with the registration data. So there are application developers, mobile app developers now that are getting into registration. There are some that are actually moving in the direction of event management software and trying to integrate the capabilities of mobile apps with all the software that does online floor plans and invoicing and all those things to manage the trade show. So that's very interesting to me. So, we're seeing these sort of standalone conference guide apps, or even these apps that do specific things like check-ins or whatever. And those guys are now seeing the tremendous potential and pain point that exists with integration of all these different siloed, systems and apps. And they're the ones that are now taking on that mantle of making everything work. And they also see the opportunity of adding these new capabilities that were formerly outside the realm of mobile app platforms, and they're learning how to own them as well. I just read on Twitter this morning that MeetingsNet created this mobile app for their magazine. So, of course, before we talked, I had to download it and play with it. And I think that's going to be the beginning of, a huge transition using, mobile devices for the content that we've gotten every other place. And again, the focus of our industry is now turning to mobile. So we've got our content for the industry going on to mobile. We have all these capabilities and software via the cloud being accessible through mobile. A lot of the ways that we're going to be engaging with each other at events, that is going to be done through mobile. So it's a huge shift. It's not just about, when we talk about mobile, I could go on and on. Marla, you can cut me off. When we talk about mobile, it is no longer a discussion of mobile apps. It is a discussion of this sort of mobile-first approach where everything is going to be revolving around mobile capabilities and the idea that our audience is now mobile-enabled, and that's how they're going to look to us to get their information and consume the event content.
Be sure to catch part 2 of our interview with Michelle Bruno. She'll be talking about second screen apps, how to use the data collected, and more. Trade Show Insights is protected by the Creative Commons copyright license. You may feel free to share this recording with colleagues as long as it is shared in its entirety and is not used for commercial purposes. To learn more, please see the link in the show notes. Well, that's it for this episode of Trade Show Insights. Be sure to check out our show notes at tradeshowinsights.com. Until next time, I'm Marlis Arnold. Thanks for listening.